today's Looking Ahead 2023, a World Insight Special. Key messages to the global community from the Chinese delegation at the ongoing World Economic Forum in Davos. As China's back to business as usual after easing pandemic measures, how can international cooperation move forward in 2023? Words from the Chinese Vice Premier Liu He, along with two Chinese business executives, in a one-on-one with Borge Brende, the WEF president.
And multilateralism and cooperation is key for prosperity.
Hello and welcome to It's Time to Answer, our special program from the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. Chinese Vice Premier Liu He spoke to the world at the ongoing World Economic Forum Tuesday. China's vision, China's economic development prospect, and China's contribution to the world today. He emphasizes development and reform and opening up, important ideas that the Chinese people hold dear to.
First, we must always take economic development as the primary and central task. Second, we must always make establishing a socialist market economy the direction of our reform. We must let the market play a decisive role in resources allocation. Let the government play a better role. Some people say China will go for the planned economy. That's by no means possible. Third, we must always promote all-round opening up. China's door to the outside will only open wider. Entrepreneurship is a key factor for wealth creation of a society. So, entrepreneurs, both Chinese and foreign, will play an important role as the engine driving China's historical pursuit of common prosperity. If wealth doesn't grow, common prosperity will become a river without source or a tree without roots.
Besides messages from the Chinese government, Chinese businesses are also working to actively interact with their counterparts at the World Economic Forum annual meeting. At the scene, Wang Min, Executive Vice President of the China Energy Investment Corporation, and Deng Jianling, the Director of the Board at the China Huaneng Group, talked to me about their takeaways.
在这次会议上呢，确实见到了很多过去的老朋友。
I have met many longtime friends and also made lots of new ones at the World Economic Forum. We all share some common expectations and we hope to strengthen old ties. China wants to reconnect with the world, and other countries are looking forward to cooperating with China.
他们呢也希望我们尽快的和他们携手。
I just had a pleasant exchange with the Siemens executives. They praised China's achievements in energy transition, especially the development of new energy. They think China's new energy development is promising, and they hope to cooperate with Chinese companies to boost the energy industry. At the same time, they hope to bring China's experience in this area to the world toward energy transition.
也希望把中国的经验带到世界，这个推动全球的能源的转型。
We need the cooperation. Different types of conflict, different types of culture, different types of company need to found the cooperation to solve where face the challenges, common challenges. It's very, very important. We can't find the balance point to cooperation together and to benefit together. This is why we come World Economic Forums. This is a Chinese company need to have this opportunity and the plan to participate in these forums. It's a good method for us to find the business opportunities. And also we can exchange the culture, the many sense businesses.
The Chinese Vice Premier emphasizes on development and reform and opening up, important ideas that the Chinese people hold dear to. They also have won sincere support from the delegates at the World Economic Forum today. As the second largest economy in the world, China's constructive role in the world today is greatly appreciated. Many that I've been talking to here in the Congress Center, where the annual meeting takes place, are looking forward to further building and strengthening bridges with China. So later today in our program, we are going to bring to you my interview with the President of the World Economic Forum, Borge Brende, on the issue of reglobalization and China's role in today's world. When the Swiss Alps long for more winter snow, when economic recession looms over the world, when geopolitics intrudes into almost everybody's life, it is time to ask the question: how can a divided world learn to work together? As the World Economic Forum holds its annual meeting, participants gather in the small town in Davos. So join me to find out how to cooperate in a fragmented world. After all, it is time for all of us to answer that question. You're watching It's Time to Answer, a special program of the World Insight on the sideline of the 2023 World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum has brought together more than 2,700 delegates from 130 countries as multiple crises deepen divisions and fragment the geopolitical landscape. Under the theme of cooperation in a fragmented world, what could be expected from the forum? On that question and many more, I talked to the President of the World Economic Forum, Borge Brende, and here is my interview. Borge Brende, what a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, and great to see you back in Europe, really.
And the forum is ever more splendid.
Oh, thank you so much.
Congratulations.
We're trying.
And this year you are trying very hard because you have a big question mark in the theme: cooperation in a fragmented world. But the question really is how, isn't it?
It is, and this annual meeting is happening against a very complicated backdrop. Geopolitically, geoeconomically, maybe the most complicated backdrop in decades. But even in such a situation, we try to identify areas where we can collaborate. And there are areas we were very pleased when President Xi Jinping and President Biden came together at the G20 meeting in Bali and agreed to restart the discussions on, for example, climate change. It shows it is possible if the will is there and to build trust.
But people always could be cynical and pessimistic when they feel it is only rhetorics being expressed. There's not much of content and actions, or one side is trying to do well, the other is not that necessarily accommodating. I'm not specifically referring to any specific side. So how do you see cynicism and also pessimism about this?
There is, unfortunately, pessimism and cynicism out there. But if we don't collaborate on the global issues, we will not find global solutions. And that will cost the world a lot moving forward, be it climate change, be it nature, but also the fragmentation of the global economy. If we continue to impose new protectionist measures and tariffs, we will see much less growth in the future. And with less economic growth, there will be less prosperity, more poverty, and less jobs out there. And I hope we don't make a mistake to pursue such a road, because that is not very, very wise.
Sometimes many wonder the challenges we have been hearing from politicians or in the media, whether those challenges are really being blown out of proportion, or some are being blown out of proportion vis-a-vis the others. What do you think, Brent?
I think you're right. I think the biggest risk is if we see a major increase in military conflicts like we have now seen in Ukraine. We will just hope that there are no additional wars. I think on the other topics we can be able to manage. Even if you look at the trade issue, we know that there are trade challenges between the two largest economies in the world, China and the US. Together, it's almost half of our global production from the US and China. Of course, there will be some more nearshoring and maybe even friendshoring. but that is related to export that is mainly high technology that can have security aspects with them, but that is maybe 10% of what China and the US export. So in 90% of the trade can continue as in the past if there is a political will to continue this win-win thinking that also will add prosperity. So we hope that we can avoid further fragmentation of the global economy.
Since you talk about China and the US, may I follow up by asking, do you see the so-called decoupling is already happening? Is there going to be an ultimate trend of decoupling? I remember several years ago when that word is being mentioned, many were dismissing those words of not likely to be the reality. What about this reality check now?
So to be realistic, I think there are some areas where there will be decoupling. For example, on semiconductors, production that is of high technology that has also dual purposes. They can have civilian purposes, but also military purposes. But this is just a very little part of the global economy. I think that both China and the US and also the European Union will clearly see that it is in all of our interests to continue to trade and invest in most of the areas. So there can be a decoupling in a very limited area and no decoupling in the large areas. That's at least what I'm hoping for. And if that happens, then we can also make sure that there is a positive growth moving forward. And of course, we are worried about the growth figures this year. There will be some countries going into recession, but I think, for example, for China, we're much more optimistic now than we were just a few months ago. We expect more substantial growth at the end of 2023, and then 2024, I think China can be back on the previous growth trajectory.
Before we go to the Chinese economy and the global economy, let me just ask a little bit further about decoupling. Why don't you think we need to make the same amount of efforts when we ask people to cooperate under a fragmented world to actually make sure to prevent those decoupling areas that you talked about? Can we do that? Why do we give up so quickly?
I think there is reasons to believe that also on technology there are win-win solutions that the big economies are still cooperating. And here in Davos, we will have a good opportunity to assess this. We have high representatives from on the trade area, both from China, the European Union, and the US. And maybe there will be something with the Davos air and the altitude that can create a little bit more of positivism. That's what I hope for.
Optimism in the air, huh?
I hope so.
Let's see how the altitude will go, huh?
Yeah.
Yes. But having said that, let's go to the economic outlook. IMF report, everybody has been following that, suggesting 1/3 of the global economy could have the possibility of going into recession 2023. So from the World Economic Forum perspective, with the stakeholders, various parts, how can you try to work with everyone to avoid it, at least to a certain extent?
The first thing we have to avoid, if we're going to avoid recession in 1/3 of the economies, is then to stop the economic fragmentation. There will be no recovery without a trade and investment recovery. That's very clear to the World Economic Forum. Secondly, we are seeing some more silver linings now than we did just a few weeks ago. We're more optimistic now on growth in China, especially towards the end of this year and next year. That's the second largest economy. So if that growth engine really starts to also use all its turbos, that will make a big difference. We're also seeing that the inflationary pressure has maybe peaked now. France and Germany, it's going down. The US, maybe it has plateaued, hopefully. That can also lead to a situation where interest rates can be then reduced. That will lead to more investments and also more optimism. It's too early to call, but I think we now need to invest in the areas that also lead to growth. Because if we don't do so, if we continue with this economic fragmentation, what we are concerned about is that we can repeat the 1970s. And you know, in 1970s we had a decade of low growth. We had low growth, high inflation, high unemployment, and high debt. So that's a really toxic cocktail that we definitely should not make, and we definitely should not drink.
5 to 5.5% of economic growth rate, that's what some economists say about China. Very likely, many believe beyond 5%. So what does that mean? Because right now, China, if you look at the decoupling, quote-unquote, issue, and the debate, rhetorical debate between China and the West, there seems to be certain worries even coming from the West about Chinese economy growing so fast. Borge, I really wonder, you know, there's always two sides of every coin. How do you see this rhetorical side regarding China's growth and actually the real growth engine China has been played the role of?
So my wish for this new year is less rhetoric, more trust, and more cooperation, because that is good both for China and also Europe and the US. We are in the same boat, but we think we're not. So then we have to regain this win-win thinking. What's good for China is good for Europe, and vice versa. Of course, there will be some adjustments in the policies. The globalization will be rethought. We will see a re-globalization, where
that's a big word.
It is, but I think that is the only way to also make this a decade of delivery when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals, but also to eradicate all extreme poverty by 2030. If we go on a path with conflicts and protectionism, we will not be able to even reach the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. On China, I think that China is now going through a few challenging months, but from the summer and in the fall, we do expect substantial economic growth again in China. And 2024, I think China is out of the woods, and Chinese economy is going to grow substantially. I think also the Chinese leadership is also very much focused on domestic consumption. It's a huge home market. It's also a home market that is very attractive for other nations. But of course, if you want access to other countries' home markets, you also have to give them access to your home market. This is a balanced game. So there is no, you should not like have this beggar thy neighbor approach, but prosper your neighbor approach.
China has been, after the 20th Party Congress, very much focusing and advocating once again about reform and opening up. You see that message repeatedly by Chinese officials, also at the World Economic Forum. Now, here is also different interpretations about why now and to what degree. So what about your interpretation?
So I feel with Vice Premier Liu He here in Davos, make a speech here tomorrow. It sent, I think, a strong message that China is back. It's also following up on Xi Jinping's message here in 2017, where he said that multilateralism and cooperation is key for prosperity moving forward. I think we will also see more reforms in the economic area in China in next quarters. I think that will be well received. I think that can then also lead to more investments and opening up. So I'm pretty optimistic.
Yeah. You see countries now of the world debating about two issues, development, security, sometimes hand in hand, sometimes vis-a-vis. So how do you see China after with your observation over the past few months, the role China is taking on, also with the words and also the spirits carried forward by Vice Premier Liu He this time at the World Economic Forum?
My feeling is that China puts prosperity, inclusiveness, and economic growth at the center. And I think this is very clear from the signals we're also getting from the Chinese leadership now. It has been a tough period with the COVID and the pandemic for all of us, all over the world, but now we have to move forward. Of course, China is also faced with challenging security issues as other nations, but what I do hope is that we can build more trust, less competition, and more collaboration, and the economy and prosperity should be at the forefront.
Having said that, though, since you talk about COVID, let's touch on that. Everyone has their unique version of experience with this pandemic. Now, China has already adjusted the policy from pandemic to epidemic. You see the changes over the past few months already. Borge, you have many friends in China. You have phone calls with them, write to them. So what do you think is actually happened in the collective memories and approaches toward COVID? And how do you think your friends and some of the people you talk to are looking at this issue as part of the past?
So I think we all want to overcome this COVID situation and we want to get on with our lives. That's also the feeling in Europe where I live. And it is a fact that with the Omicron variant, it's more infectious, so it spreads faster. It spreads like wildfire, but it is less also lethal. So we see less people dying from this variant than the previous variants. Of course, I know also from my friends in China, and I have many of them, that China is going through a challenging situation now with the spread of COVID. We have been through this also in the past, but I know that China will overcome this and China will come out stronger. People can go back to work and a normal life, and prosperity will be back. I think we all long for life without masks, and that we can visit our parents and relatives and friends freely, that we can travel abroad again. So we are looking very much forward to see all our Chinese friends coming in the summer to Europe. And I'm also looking very much forward myself to go to China. I haven't been in China in 2.5, 3 years, and I used to be in China at least 5 times a year, you know.
Not only if I'm working on the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, but also on the new champion meeting, usually taking place early autumn. So if you got a chance to do that this year, let's just say, what would you like to focus on?
So we very much would like to go back with our summer Davos, the meeting of the new champions in China, hopefully in early fall. And we would like to then focus on cooperation. We would like to focus on the huge opportunities there are to invest in China, but also areas for collaboration, the energy transformation, the food crisis, nature, where China has shown important leadership in the new and updated conventions on how to take care of the species and biodiversity. 30 by 2030, protecting 30% of our nature by 2030 for future generations. I think that will be a big topic, the new technologies. There's so much to discuss after a period where we only saw each other on digital. I know we can also do a lot of things together in a personalized way.
I really wonder, because I go through this period myself, I'm sure you too in a different version, after being confined at home, but on the other hand, being with our loved ones for much longer time than we used to be, and looking at the world, how do you see, our understanding of who we are, and what we can do, and what we can do collectively has been evolving? Are we going to keep that memory, by the way?
I think the COVID is probably one of the biggest news stories in our lifetime. I think it's
going to continue as well.
Yeah, I think we will not forget those 3 years. I think it's all in us. Of course, we came closer to our families because we couldn't see other people. We were confined to our homes. But personally, I'm I love my family, but I think it's also great to be able to travel again, meet new people. I think the good thing with this world is that we also learn from other cultures. I believe in cultural exchange and win-win thinking. So
yeah. And finally, before we go, how should we make sure that the rediscovery process between us and many others after these 3 years will not be bittered by rhetorics once again? I think World Economic Forum has been thinking about that a lot.
That's why we also have the theme, as you can see, collaboration, cooperation in a fragmented world. We strongly believe in building trust and getting people together. There will be areas where we look at things differently and where leaders do disagree, but that's always been the case. But I think on some core values, but also on some core signals, let's deal with things around the negotiating table and not fight it with military equipment and military means. Let's also deal with other difficult economic challenges by sitting together and make compromises. It is in life, as in politics as in life, you can't get it 100% your way. You have to make compromises. But of course, then you have to be willing to that. As I used to say when I was foreign minister and Norway did peace and reconciliation work, we could bring the horses to the well, but you can't force the horses to drink the water. So what I hope now, what the forum can do, we can bring all the horses to the well, and hopefully the water is of such a good quality that there will be a lot of drinking of water.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's all the time for today's special program. It's time to answer on the sideline of the World Economic Forum in Davos. On behalf of my team here in Davos and in Beijing, thanks so much for being with us. And I'll see you tomorrow.